Chances are pretty good if you're paying attention to gaming news and conversation on the internet. You've been hearing a lot about this new game recently called Valheim. It's an exploration survival game. It is set in a procedurally generated Viking-inspired world, and it launched just a couple of weeks ago and has been getting just rave reviews. Lots of positive talk about this thing. It has over 30,000 reviews on Steam that are overwhelmingly positive. It sold over 1 million copies in the first week, I guess, and just recently it peaked at over 340,000 concurrent players on Steam, which is quite a massive number. People have been loving this game, and after spending a bit of time with it myself over these past few days, I have to say, I think it's for a very good reason. This thing is legitimately fantastic. Valheim is, I know the phrase early access survival game will scare a lot of people off, and I totally understand, but the value and the package that they have delivered with this thing just already has been phenomenal. Well worth the $20 that I spent on this game in the 25 hours that I've played up until this point. So I want to take you through some of my experience with this game and some of the reasons why I think people have just been loving it so very much, and the reasons it seems to be doing so very well. So the game opens up with you being flown in by this crow creature into this 10th world. Again, the world is procedurally generated. It's made up of these 5 separate biomes, and they will be placed and laid out in a varying, I mean, think of any procedurally generated game like you could say Minecraft, for example. The world is seeded, and how it's laid out is going to be completely different in every new instance, every new seed for the game. But you're basically, you're placed in the middle into the Meadows lands, which is kind of like the introductory biome. And then the bird creature is summoned and basically tells you need to hunt down these 5 bosses known as the Forsaken, and then you're just kind of sent on your way. You're not given too much guidance from the onset. So in my first play session, I'm dropped off in the center, and I go around, I'm collecting wood and stone, picking up berries for food. The game does have a hunger system where you'll have these various types of food sources, different kinds of fruits and meats that you find. So yeah, I'm eating some berries, I'm collecting this stuff, and then I'm introduced to kind of like the first, I guess, aggressive enemies in the game. They're called these Greylings, and they're funny looking woodland creatures, basically. They're kind of rumbling around, and when they get relatively close to you, they'll just instantly start attacking you. So I've been collecting these resources, and I start off with the very first thing that I craft is this club, as well as a stone axe. After making my club and stone axe and chopping down some trees and hunting some more animals, gathering some more berries, I was then able to craft my first hammer, and that is when I unlocked the ability to make a basic campfire, make a cooking station to cook some of the meat that I've been finding, and most importantly, I was able to craft my first workbench. And the workbench, once you make that, is when the crafting really starts to open up. This lets you make some basic rag clothing, various melee and ranged weapons like bows and arrows, and these blunt melee weapons, and this basic kind of dagger. But also the workbench opens up the base construction, letting you make things like the roof, the walls, stairs, things like that. So I spent actually about an hour, once I was able to make my own base, I spent about an hour going around gathering resources and building up my very first little hut, but then also going through the process of equipping myself for the first boss fight. So once I had some weapons and some basic armor, I then went out to go deer hunting, because in order to summon the first boss, I needed to collect trophies of its kin. So the first boss, Eikthyr, is this like stag creature, so I went out to hunt some deer, and every so often you'll get a little deer trophy. I had to get a few of these. In the process, it turned to night, and I ended up stumbling across this camp of gray dwarfs. They were located at this little like stone statue area, and these were essentially these stronger versions of those basic greyling enemies that I was first introduced to. And the gray dwarfs really come out in throngs at night, and there'll be a whole different host of types of these. There'll be like shamans and brutes and things like that, as well as the basic swarming creatures. But yeah, they sure swarmed me. These things were chasing me down. I tried running back to my base. It wasn't cutting it. I eventually realized, even though there were many of them, I would have to fight them off. It's really cool because the game has interesting mechanics to it. So there's a basic blocking, and there's light and heavy attacks depending on the weapons that you're using. But there's also a parry system where if you properly time a block, it's going to stagger the enemy that you're fighting, which opens them up to allowing you to deal some massive damage as a counterattack. So I was actually able to, even though there were, I thought I was ill prepared, I was able to fight off that swarm of gray dwarfs that was chasing me down. And also, as I continued to hunt these deer trophies, I ended up accidentally stumbling into one of the new biomes, which was was the mountain region. This is like this snowy, mountainous region. And I quickly learned I didn't belong there because after stepping foot just for a few moments, I started freezing to death, which was ticking my health down. So I got out of there. I finished hunting the trophies for the deers, and I made my way to the altar of the very first boss. I was not expecting what happened next. So he summons in, it's this massive stag with huge antlers that are wrapped in these lightning infused chains. As you summon him in, it also calls forth this wind and rainstorm, which makes sense because he's like a lightning god or something. He chases you around trying to not only impale you with his huge horns, but he's got this ground stomp that he can do that seems to do some AoE. And if you're spending a lot of time running around and kiting him, which I was doing, he can shoot lightning in like a straight line, which I'm embarrassed to say, but yes, it did hit me a couple times. Frankly, the boss fight wasn't terribly hard. It was just a lot of running around, kiting, and shooting him with the arrow. But it doesn't seem, like I said, the combat isn't super crazy in depth from what I've seen. There's probably more depth than what I know so far. The basics of the combat have seemed pretty simplistic. It's a lot of moving away from the melee attacks, kiting, shooting with the arrows, or just sidestepping attacks. But regardless, even though it's not some like Dark Souls level of depth in the combat, it's still enjoyable and I would say serviceable because it's the whole experience of what Valheim delivers what makes it great. It's not because this game has the best combat in any survival action game ever, but the whole experience is good and the combat I think is fine. It's again serviceable is what I would say. So yeah, I killed the boss, all right? I killed the boss, bring him to these like summoning stones and put his trophy on his particular stone. And that's when I realized when you kill those bosses and you mount their trophies, you get these new powers. So the power that I got from this first boss, Eikthyr, it's a buff that lasts for 5 minutes that basically reduces the amount of stamina drained when I do activities. So I can run much further without getting winded or jump, which was very useful early on before I had my first boat or before I opened up my summoning portals and things like that, which are both things that we'll get to a little bit later. Basically, that's a synopsis of my first play session. It lasted 3 hours. I have to say, I was pretty much hooked instantly. Since that play session, I've continued to play. I've sunk about 25 hours in total. It's so crazy because it feels like I'm just scratching the surface of this game. I've managed to kill that one boss, and then the second boss, which was this Elder Tree boss, he is found in the Black Forest biome. First of all, I had to find where his summoning area was, and then I had to hunt these trophies off of these elite versions of the gray creatures, you know, like the Greylings that I talked about. There's like these big versions of them, and they've got multiple tiered difficulties with the star system that they have, but I basically had to hunt these shamans and these brutes to get the trophies. And then once I had enough trophies, I was able to summon the Elder. And this boss fight was freaking hilarious. First of all, it's this massive tree creature. He will summon up roots that will attack you if you're far away from him. But beyond that, he shoots like this barrage of vines at you. That was a fun boss fight, I have to say. I liked the second boss fight much more than the first. But yes, I've only killed 2 of the 5 bosses in the game. At this point, I'm working on upping my gear as well as getting some poison resist so I can survive in the swamp biome, which is where I have to go to fight the 3rd boss. I've also been upgrading my tech trees, so I've learned at this point to smelt bronze, which has let me build better weapons as well as armor, and I've got this brand new boat, which is much quicker than that base raft. The first boat that you can build is just basically some floating logs with this little sail, and it moves achingly slow. You can run much faster, but it's good for crossing the water. But now that I have my new boat, this thing hauls. It's got some carrying capacity, which lets me gather some resources beyond what I can carry on my person to bring back to my main base. And I also just recently started opening up portals. So the portal system in this game is really cool. Basically, like everything else, it is self-crafted. So I get these unique resources that are found in dungeons within the game. It has like dungeons. There'll be like skeletons and stuff, and you have to fight them to get these unique special items. There's also really powerful food items that are found in these dungeons. You get these special resources, you put down a portal, and then you just go wherever you want and place down another portal. And they're linked together by this tag system where basically you interact with the portal, you call it whatever you want, and then it will link up with whatever other portal is also called that. I've barely scratched the surface of this game. There's so much to it. As I mentioned, there are multiple biomes. The first biome that I started out in, and I'm pretty sure it's the basic biome for everybody, everybody when you're flown into the center. It's called the Meadow region. And then beyond that, the next biome you tend to go to is the Black Forest. And then there's also the swamp, the plains, and the mountains. Each biome has its own unique diversity of plants and trees and creatures within it. So the different types of food that you're gonna forage for, the different types of creatures you're gonna hunt for resources, like the main enemy, kind of like we've got the Greylings and stuff there in the base area, but also the Black Forest. Once I made my way into the swamp biome, whole host of brand new enemies. There were these skeletons that are constantly on fire and they'll hurl fireballs at you. There are these these Drog type creatures. There are these oozlings which will bounce around and explode on you, dealing poison damage. You can't stay at the edge of the water for very long because there are these eels which apply a ton of poison damage to you. And I still haven't spent any time in the plains region. I have stumbled into the mountains, at which point I saw like these wyvern-like flying creatures. There are also these wolves that completely kicked my ass. I also know the sail, like I mentioned, there's boats in the game. While you're out on the ocean, there are multiple sea creatures. I know there's this one like sea dragon creature that I guess will ruin your life. I also heard that there's a kraken in the game. I think what I've really loved about this game is every time I play, it feels like there's something new that I'm accomplishing. Like I'm meaningfully progressing my character. And I think that's the other thing that's worth noting. There are skill levels for every activity that you do. As I run and as I jump, it's going to increase my running and jumping capacity. Same thing with swimming, any sort of combat that you do, unarmed, melee combat, archery, any sort of resource gathering that you do. There are levels associated with all of those activities. So there's no like character level, like I haven't gone from level 1 to 50, but I have progressed the skills of the things that I've done, which makes me incrementally better with every new level. There's just so much going on. But yes, every time I play, I feel like I'm making meaningful progression, whether I'm upgrading, getting a new piece of armor, upgrading a piece of armor, learning a new skill, like how I recently learned to make bronze, which then let me make bronze nails, which let me make the boat. It's just like a huge checklist of all these different things to do, and it feels good to make progress. But then beyond that, out of the 25 hours, I've probably spent at least a good 5 hours just base building. So I've got this main base which has all of my highest tier crafting stuff and most of the storage of all of my items. But then as I go out into the world, I've got these little camps that I also construct. So you go in there, you set up a campfire, a bed, a workbench, just some basic things, a few storage chests for you to go out, fight, and then come back and put stuff while you're over encumbered. And the whole thing just feels like this huge grand adventure. The game has done a really good job making you want to explore, making you want to go out and see what's around the next corner. And I think that a lot of times I feel like these procedural generation games can just end up feeling like a lot of nothing. But in this game, I look at my map and all of the first of all, I've probably only uncovered like 2 to 5% of the map. The whole map is huge, but everything that I've seen, when I look at the map, I've got vivid memories of when I went across every location and every base camp that I set up and the different encounters. If I came across this massive forest troll in the Black Forest as I was trying to make my base so that I could construct a boat so that I could sail across this body of water, but then this big troll comes along and I got to deal with that, and he knocked down some trees and it fell into my house, and like these little adventures and these little memories scattered along the way, and I can recall them just looking at my map. And all of these encounters I had were like happenstance. They were procedural, and I would have had a very, very different experience if I'd gone in the exact same directions, but in another seed. You know what I'm saying? In someone else's world, the whole thing could have been drastically different. It's just really cool. There's just, I think, a lot of potential here. And there's so much. Like I said, I'm just scratching the surface. I've only killed 2 of the bosses. There's 3 more in the game. And then besides the 5 biomes in the game, apparently they've got multiple new biomes and new bosses that are coming because, again, this game is an early access. There's also, I gotta say, one thing that I think has really lended to this game as a survival game doing so well and getting so much notoriety so quickly. It's really focused on like cooperative or solo experience. Like there is PvP in the game, but the way the game is structured, it's just clearly not a game focused on PvP, where I feel like a lot of survival games are. And unless I purposefully join a random person server who has PvP toggled hold on. Unless I do that, there's no concern of me losing my stuff. And so it really just becomes about the exploration and the adventure. And I've also only just been playing this whole thing solo. I haven't even grouped up with any friends, and I've been having an amazing time. So besides that, I think that the other thing that's also lending to this game's popularity right now is just its price. Like I said, it's in Steam Early Access, and it's available for only $20. So it's a very, very affordable game in this genre. And then yeah, it's just everything it does, it's done well. There are some gripes that I could say I have. Like, I do like the general visuals. I think the aesthetic, like the color palette that they chose, some of the lighting that you see in sunrise and sunset, the various weather effects when storms are coming in, windstorms, rainstorms, whatever. Visually, I think the game looks good, but also at times bad. Like some of the models, character models in this game, like especially the large forest trolls, I think they look weird. There are some things about the visuals that I don't like, but overall, the general atmosphere and the design, I think, is great. It looks absolutely gorgeous. Some of the animations aren't that great. That would probably be another complaint. I feel like the combat could use a little bit more fine-tuning, but all around, I have mostly positive things to say. Just like the Steam reviews, I have overwhelmingly positive things to say about this game. I absolutely recommend you check out Valheim if you haven't yet. If you even have the slightest inclination, if you might be saying to yourself, Forrest, I played all these Steam early access survival games, they're all the same. This one's not. This one's got just enough different, and everything that it's done so far has been just absolutely fantastic. I'm having a great time. I just want to keep playing. I am just going to keep playing. A little plug for my Twitch stream if you want to come check that out. I'll be playing Valheim there for the foreseeable future because this thing has been just that enjoyable. So since it is an early access, I want to mention a couple things that they said on the Steam page here. They said they expect it's going to continue to be in early access for at least 1 year. Now, what new stuff is likely to be coming? Well, as I mentioned, there are already brand new biomes that are planned besides the 5s that are in there. New enemies, brand new bosses. They're going to add new materials to the game as well. The foundation of the game that they have and the core mechanics and gameplay loop, I think, are totally solid. If they can just pack more in there, maybe add some more enemy variety or something like that, that's going to be great. I think that's exactly what they should focus on. But yeah, I've got pretty much nothing but positive things to say about Valheim. I think you should totally believe all of the hype that this thing is getting because it really is that good. And if you have that 20 bucks to spare and you're even remotely interested, give this thing a shot. I think you'll end up really I was surprised when I first saw the trailer. I was like, oh great, another early access survival game. Sure, I like the Norse theming, but whatever. No, it's not whatever. It's great. It's a good game. So yeah, there you go. That is Valheim. Thank you guys for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna go play some more. Okay, I'll see you guys later.